If you want to break 90, there are a few things you can do to bring down those scores. Today I'm meeting up with PGA Professional Jack Backhouse to run us through 5 tips that will help you break 90. For a approach player, how important is it for people actually to know how far their clubs go?
Well, really important. So something that people need to consider is how far do they fly the ball and then how far does it run out? We play lots of courses where there's bunkers in front of the greens, there's ditches and stuff. Having a rough, I think I hit this 150 isn't really good enough. It's certainly not accurate enough. And if you're really trying to lower your scores, you want to be much more precise in your approach. If I was stood 150 from the flag, I would want to know sort of how far is it to the front edge, how far is it to the flag, how far is it to the back edge. And then roughly I'm then thinking, well, I'll probably want to land the ball 145. So what club do I hit that lands 145 and then might run out a little bit more? There's no reason why you can't go to a driving range with some sort of simulator, hit all your clubs, write down all your carry distance and all the run outs and, you know, just make better decisions when you're out on the course.
I think it's also important when people are doing that they're getting a mixture of strikes, because you're not going to strike it perfect every time, so you shouldn't just be saying, oh well, when I absolutely flush my 7-iron it goes 160.
Yes.
Because that's not representative of how you hit that club every time.
Definitely. I know loads of people who, when I say, what do you hit your 7, and they go 170, and I'm looking at the data on the flight scope and it's nothing like 170. When you're doing your yardages, it's not just about how far does your best go. You've got to hit like 10, 15 balls to get all sorts of the heel strike, the toe strike, the slightly thin one, just to get what you want to know is your average. How far do I hit it on average? And if you hit it long, because you flush it, then that's just so be it, but you don't do that every time. So you've got to, you're exactly right, you've just got to know.
Yeah, because I think generally we see amateur golfers coming up short a lot more than they're long.
Yes.
So actually having that more accurate average, playing to almost like further back in the green to make sure your ball's actually up there, because how often do you actually really flush a shot on the golf course? Probably a lot less frequent than you actually don't quite catch it right. So having that distance, even if it's slightly shorter than your best shot, is probably actually quite a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think even on the PGA Tour, if the pin's at the front, like the scoring average is much higher than if it's at the middle or in the back. Amateur golfers aren't the only people getting caught out by not getting it far enough. For me, I play with a GPS, so I like to know front, middle, back, and I'm generally always playing it definitely to the middle number, even if it's at the front. And then if it's at the back, I probably don't want to go long, so I might still hit that to the middle number as well. But you can't hit those shots without knowing how far your club goes.
When it comes to putting, do you think people kind of lose shots out of frustration a lot of times because they get annoyed they've not holed like a 30-footer, when realistically the chance of them holding that is pretty slim?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a big sort of complete, misunderstanding with amateurs of, actually what is a good putt, what is a good outcome for the shot in front of you. So we know that outside of 8 feet on tour, they're making less than 50%, and it's a dramatic drop off, isn't it, outside of 15 feet. As not a tour player, if my ball's outside of 10 feet, yes, I'd like it to go in, but actually it's not the end of the world if I don't, and often I'm trying not to, I'm almost thinking, this doesn't have to go in for me, for it to be a good putt.
Where's the best miss is almost the right thing to be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're over 25 feet, which, we get that probably 4 or 5 times around, the worst thing you can do is 3-putt. So what you don't want to be doing is, if you've not made a putt all day, standing there thinking, right, I'll give this a bit of extra and see if I can knock this one in, but instead staying patient and going, well, the odds of me knocking this in are less than 5%, so actually all I should be trying to do here is 2-putt. So where do I want to be hitting my second putt from? So on this one, for example, we're putting uphill. The easier putt would be short, so I want to leave myself an uphill putt. Where if I was putting downhill, actually I probably will hit it a bit harder, because I want that uphill putt coming back, because I certainly feel a lot more confident on those ones than the slippery downhillers.
I think it's fair to say bunkers aren't generally club golfers' friends, and people can rack up massive scores in these. So what would be a simple technique to just make sure you're getting out of these every time? So
I think we almost have to reframe the bunker and think that actually this is the easiest shot, because we don't actually have to hit the ball first. This is the only shot we get to play around the course where we're trying to fat the ball deliberately, which is definitely something most golfers can do. Where people go wrong, in my view, is their contact with the sand is always in the wrong place. So most of the times what I see is people dumping the club in the sand, a foot to 6 inches behind the ball, and either what happens is the club gets stuck and the ball doesn't get out, or the club bounces and they knife it either into the lip or you know, out of bounds on the other side of the green. What we have to try and think about here is the ideal place to strike the sand is about 1 inch behind the ball. I'm not thinking, you know, miles behind the ball. I'm definitely not trying to hit the ball first. What I'm stood here looking at is 1 inch behind the ball. I've got a nice wide stance with my feet dug in. I've opened the face a fraction, but you don't have to do that. And then all I'm trying to do is make a big enough swing to give it enough power to get the ball out, and just try and make contact with the sand 1 inch behind. Now, you don't have to break 90, we don't have to be getting it close. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. We don't have to lob it up with spin or whatever. Just get it on the green. So what I suggest people do is go into a practice bunker, draw a line in the sand, and just make lots of swings, trying to make contact with the line. And that way you're improving your ability to control your low point in the sand. And that's the magic of bunkers. Hit the sand in the right place, the ball will pop out every time.
So once we get down to the shorter clubs, it can be really tempting to just fire straight at the pin. How is that affecting people's scoring?
If you regularly watch golf on TV, we're watching the highlights and the tour players are all banging shots at flags. They're doing it with relative ease, and golfers get the idea that they too should be playing like that. But if you're trying to break 90, we're not at that ability yet. So if you're aiming at flags, certainly that are either on the right or left side of the green, you're going to miss the green on the short side too often. So a good general rule is wherever the flag is, almost forget that it's there, aim for the middle, left to right, and then aim middle, front to back, you know, the sort of real center of the green, and that should allow for slight pulls, slight pushes, slight miss hits that go short, and then the real flush one you hit that goes a bit long, to give ourselves like the best chance of getting the ball on the green.
It's almost like you have to have an imaginary like flag or target in your head and kind of move where it is, because for me, like here, all the right of this green is out of bounds.
Yep.
So even for me, I would want to look at the left side of this green and maybe even accept that by doing that, I might miss this green a few times left, but it means my ball isn't going to go out of bounds. So that ability to be able to move the target relative to what trouble there is around the green.
Something you want to think about before you hit your shot is actually, where would I want to chip from? You know, where's the easiest place to chip? So as you say, if you hit it right here, you're out of bounds, and then you straight away penalty shots where, like you say, going left, I've got the flags on the right, so I've got loads of green to work with. I've got a really straightforward chip shot. I'm not having to throw it up and go over anything. I can just get my 8-iron out and get it running. And even if you miss the green on that side, you've still got a pretty good chance of getting up and down. So what we've got to do to break 90 isn't necessarily make more birdies, it's just let's stop the doubles, no double bogeys. So if you can hit shots that basically guarantee you won't hit double, that's what we should be doing.
But generally, if someone's trying to break 90, they're probably going to have a lot more kind of longer clubs, so fairways and hybrids into the greens. How can someone get really good in that area?
I think the first thing we have to sort of realise when hitting the fairways and hybrids is it's a different swing to the driver. And although they both have like quite big heads, it's certainly a completely different setup. So where the driver, we've got the ball right up in our stance and we're leaning back, so we're trying to sort of launch it up. These fairway woods and hybrids, we're hitting these much more like irons. You know, the most important thing when you're hitting a fairway wood or a hybrid is getting the contact right, because if we're trying to break 90, we need that ball advancing at the green, whether it accurately or not, as much as possible. We can't afford to be wasting shots on like really bad fats or tops or whatever. So with a fairway wood, we want to make sure the ball's inside our left heel, where we have it sort of left heel for driver. I don't like people leaning too far back, because that promotes people to sort of ground out too early, try and help it up in the air, and that's where you get the fats and tops. My thought for this is really, can we hit the ball and then make it like almost a small divot just after the left foot? Where I think people with fairway woods specifically, they're trying to sweep it too much, and that's where the fats and tops come from.
Yeah, so letting the loft of the club do its thing, don't try add extra loft to it, and just kind of trust the club's going to give you the height and just focus on like the strike through the ball.
Yeah, definitely. We're not trying to, you know, if we've got a fairway wood, we're not going to be particularly accurate. We've got to just get the ball at the green, and if it misses the green, then that's great, at least we're down there. So don't worry about trying to set up for maximum distance or for like really accurate, you know, don't expect to hit the green every time. We just want to make sure and sort of like guarantee we're going to strike the ball okay, and it's at least going to move and sort of be pin high, so that we can then chip it on and get away.